Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. The leader of the ruling Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczyński, promised higher salaries and retirement pensions at the party's convention in Lublin, as well as promising to fight for Polish farmers to receive EU benefits equal to those received by farmers in other EU member states. The Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, declared that it was time to build Poland's greatness.
In this term of office, and if society chooses us again in the next one as well, we need to focus on raising salaries for all Poles and the general income for the Polish nation. I want to tell you that by the end of 2020, in 12 months, the minimum wage will be 3,000 zloty per month. By the end of 2023, it will be 4,000. Our goal is to build a Polish version of the welfare state. I think we've grown enough to do that.
Poprzez decyzję o charakterze państwowym.
Dana nam jest przepiękna polska ziemia.
We were put in charge of the beautiful Polish land. It's a responsibility that we cannot waste, and we have no intention of doing so. Thanks to the sacrifice and efforts of our parents and grandparents, we finally have a free, independent Poland. We need to build on that treasure, improve on it. We chose a good, fruitful, happy future for Poles. I firmly believe that we will prevail again for the well-being of Poles for the generations to come.
Sprawić, żeby rozkwitł jeszcze piękniej.
Members of the Gazeta Polska weekly readers' clubs met at a summit in Solejów. For both domestic and international members of the club, this event was another opportunity to discuss the most pressing issues concerning Poland.
Piąty nadzwyczajny zjazd klubów Gazety Polskiej.
The fifth special summit of the Gazeta Polska clubs began on Friday afternoon in Solejów. The event was officially opened by the editor-in-chief Tomasz Sakiewicz and the president of the Gazeta Polska clubs, Ryszard Kapuściński. The main guest of honor was the former Minister of Defense Antoni Macierewicz, who read aloud the letter from the Polish PM Mateusz Morawiecki.
Gromkimi brawami, po czym odczytał list od premiera.
The Gazeta Polska clubs are probably one of the biggest actively operating social movements in Europe, where people work voluntarily, creating a great community in smaller towns, in bigger cities and in their places of work. Most of their members have never met each other, only their representatives. It's a huge organization gathering lots of people who, even when they argue about something, are still united in the love for the country.
Dzisiaj już od samego rana.
Today the most important matters regarding the activities of the clubs were discussed, as well as the parliamentary elections next month. More letters were read aloud as well, including from the Speaker of the Senate Stanisław Karczewski and the leader of the Law and Justice Party Jarosław Kaczyński. The summit will end tomorrow.
Stanisława Karczewskiego.
The 8th edition of the National Reading in the Saxon Garden in Warsaw, which was begun by the presidential couple at noon, is coming to an end. 8 Polish novellas were read aloud, written by such legendary authors as Eliza Orzeszkowa, Bolesław Prus and Henryk Sienkiewicz.
We are reading not one, but 8 great works of art. 8 Polish novellas characterized by different styles, originating in various literary periods, from Romanticism to Positivism up to the interwar period. Polish literature is not only monumental works or great dramas, but also novels. It should be emphasized here that novels occupy a prominent place in Polish literature. It could be jokingly said that Polish literature, or certainly Polish literature of the 19th century, is still a novel. The presidential couple chose 8 readings which, as Andrzej Duda pointed out, teach us that in life we should be guided by nobility and solidarity, that we must not lose sensitivity towards human suffering nor forget about our history. The ever-changing Polish language, the slowly changing Polish mentality, the changing needs, the changing worldview, but the values appearing in these novels are always the same. They emphasize deep patriotism, mercy, a very sensitive and kind outlook towards others and their needs, at poverty, at everything that is such an important part of life. The national reading was organized for the first time in 2012. It was initiated by a joint reading of Pan Tadeusz by Adam Mickiewicz. In the previous edition, in connection with the 100th anniversary of Poland regaining independence, Stefan Żeromski was read across the globe, including Antarctica. In addition, the presidential couple suggested reading the Anthology of Independence throughout the year. This is a collection from works created over the centuries and included in the canon of Polish patriotic literature, especially prepared for this occasion.
A plane carrying 35 Ukrainian prisoners held by Russia landed at Kiev Boryspil Airport. The men were part of a prisoner exchange for Russian prisoners held in Ukraine. The exact number of the Russian ex-prisoners has not been disclosed, although rumours suggest that the number is at least 33.
Honestly, for over a year I haven't been as nervous as in the last week. In prison, at some point, everything becomes so plain. The days just turn into days between court hearings. Everything around is grey, indifferent. The emotional background is just plain. Whereas in this week, my emotional background has been very extreme. It gets to the top, then it falls back down and comes back up. I congratulate everyone on the return of our heroes. Today we can speak about everything openly. Today, on September 7th, 2019, despite the obstacles, we had a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We have agreed on the first stage of unblocking our dialogue and on the first step in ending the war, the return of our prisoners of war, our soldiers, our sailors and our territories. Russia has held dozens of Ukrainian prisoners since the start of the war between Ukrainian troops and Russian-backed separatists in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine in 2014, which has claimed over 13,000 lives. The captives include 24 sailors detained by Russia in the Kerch Strait last year, as well as the filmmaker Oleg Sentsov.
That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.
Hello, and welcome to Poland Daily Weather. The weather for tonight calls for rain in the south and east. We can expect fog in Warsaw and Olsztyn, and partly cloudy skies in Szczecin, Poznań, Gdańsk, Bydgoszcz, and Łódź. The temperatures should vary from 11 to 14 degrees centigrade. Tomorrow, most of the regions in the country should see rain. The only exceptions will be Białystok and Lublin, where we can expect partly cloudy skies. The warmest city will be Bydgoszcz at 30 degrees, while the coldest will be in the southwest, where we can see Wrocław and Zielona Góra can expect a temperature of 15 degrees centigrade. That is all for now. I invite you to stay with us and to join us later on for Poland Daily Business.
You're watching Poland Daily Business. We are at Economic Forum in Krynica-Zdrój, and that's annual event. This time our special guest is General Robert Spalding of Hudson Institute and previously United States Army. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, when we are looking at the movement taken by the United States government, we see for the first time in 30 years challenging China. And we hear about trade agreements, we hear, or rather talks about trade agreement. What is the goal that the United States wants to achieve?
Yes, I think the United States would like to rebalance its economic relationships across the globe through bilateral agreements with its allies and partners that promote the shared values of their democracies.
Mm-hmm. We see the countries of Western Europe that are democratic by itself. We see Russia that has steered democracy. Vladimir Putin is winning every single presidential election, and the power is kept in strong hands. And we have China that until the end of 1980s was the starving country, and right now is the second biggest economic power. Why did it happen? Why China grew up so quickly?
Well, I think from the United States' standpoint, after they entered the WTO, billions of dollars went in foreign direct investment into China. Of course, America's economy was opened up to Chinese business, and in fact, the United States deindustrialized and sent almost its entire industrial base into China for the purpose of the corporations for increased margins. Now, essentially, China has used that bastion of industrial capacity to grow its economy, to be over $13 trillion from before it entered the WTO, less than $1 trillion.
With that money and that potential, we can see the political influence over the world.
Of course, and what they use is the very large market economy of 1.4 billion people and the financial resources of those people in order to influence the corporations, the financial markets, the banks, the politicians, academia. So across the society, you have this very strong financial incentive to do things according to the Chinese Communist Party.
How the United States wants to rebalance that?
The United States would like to rebalance that with democracies to create shared relationships based on economics and financial that are market-based, that actually promote shared interests and shared values.
If I understand correctly, you are saying that the United States will work with the countries that are already democratic in order to boost the shared values. But what about China?
So I think increasingly, if China continues to pursue a very state-owned, enterprise-led economy, which they have since 2008, then you're going to see less and less interaction between the U.S. economy, the U.S. financial markets, U.S. trade with China, and more rebalance to the free nations of the world.
So this is also called decoupling China from the markets of Western Europe and the United States, Japan, South Korea, and so on.
And to be honest, I think China's actually itself decided to decouple because it had a trade agreement, 150 pages. They tore up 50 pages and essentially walked away from the discussion.
That was last May.
That was their decision. And I think that is because the Chinese Communist Party wants to continue to have control over state-owned enterprises and have a non-market-based economy.
Mm-hmm. With the American tariffs, are they lured back to the conversation, to the negotiating table?
You would think that they would understand how important it is to have this opportunity to be tied to the global community, not just the United States. But again, they are more interested in control over their society than they are in actually having an honest discussion about free trade.
Mm-hmm. Apart from that, we also see the Hong Kong right now and kind of reluctant reaction of the Chinese authority because they didn't crush this movement yet.
And it looks like they're going to have a lot of difficulty doing that. The people of Hong Kong actually realize what's happening, a slow erosion of their democracies, just like has happened to the rest of the world as they've been connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, Chinese has control over Hong Kong, and with the extradition law, what the Hong Kong people realize, if they didn't fight for their freedom, they would lose it.
So you look at the Hong Kong as a spot on the map of Earth when the Chinese communists are confronted with freedom-loving people?
Yes, and in fact, what you see is the rest of the world starting to react, starting to understand what is the Chinese Communist Party? Is it promoting a free society, or is it really a totalitarian regime? Of course, we know now it's a totalitarian regime.
And we will deal with that, or at least the United States will do that.
And we will deal with our allies and partners in the way that we always have.
What do you expect from Poland then?
To work very closely with America, both in security and economics and finance and trade, to have a shared, prosperous and free future.
General Robert Spalding, sir, thank you very much for this conversation. And that was it for tonight's Poland Daily Business.
Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily Business Weather. The forecast for tomorrow calls for showers in most of the major cities in Poland. The only exceptions will be Białystok and Lublin, where we can expect to see partly cloudy skies. The coldest spots on the map will be in the southwest, with Wrocław and Zielona Góra at 15 degrees, and the warmest will be Bydgoszcz at 30 degrees centigrade. In Europe, we can expect to see rain in the central regions of the continent. We will see clear skies in Ankara, Athens and Lisbon, and the rest of the continent can expect partly cloudy skies. The coldest spot on the map will be Oslo at 13 degrees, and the warmest will be Athens at 31 degrees centigrade. That is all for tonight. I thank you for joining us, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and this is Poland Daily Culture. Today in studio we have a very original band. He's Polish and she's Chinese, and they make music together. Ladies and gentlemen, Pomponika.
Hello.
Hello. Łucja and Piotr, thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
But before we listen to their story, let's hear them play.
Violence with born from the consciousness far beyond we could realize. Deep inside you prefer to use a fist, cause it saves time for both of us.
You're a couple on a stage, but also a couple in real life. How did both work together? How does it work?
I think it's great. I think absolutely. Because we have a common passion and we can travel and we can talk and it's all connected with our music. So it's very convenient.
But you can never escape. If whenever you quarrel on the stage, then you bring it back home.
Yes, I remember Piotr's mother once warned us before we started the band together. So Mama said, you know, Peter, be careful. Now you are going to have a band with your wife. That if you didn't handle it very well, it could make this relationship very difficult.
Yes, it's always. But I think it's actually so far so good. Yes, ma'am? So I hope we can succeed and we will not have any quarrels.
I mean, it's lucky if your soulmate it's also happened to be your colleague and your closest friend in this band. Because, you know, it's never easy to have a band and work with other people. But this is my husband, and we can share anything and share any thought in any place at any time. So that makes the communication much easier. But of course, because you will have disagreement sometimes because you're individuals, so there will be some arguing moment, but no harm feelings. So I would say it's both good and not that good.
Wonderful. And who is responsible in your band for lyrics and who is responsible for music?
I think we discuss most of the things, but definitely the creative part is Cinka, Łucja. Yes, I'm trying to focus on the live performances because it's a bit different story when you just hear music online, yes, or when you really have to perform for people live. So
I guess much more engaging and difficult to also take the audience with you to this and make them understand your music. Is it the case?
It's just different, I think. Just slightly different shades of emotions, I think, you need to have. Because if you have very dreamy music, it works great, like online. So your audience is listening on the earphones your music, and they are just chill out. But on the live performance, you need to, I think, have a bit of dreamy music, but also a bit of
rhythmic,
higher emotions.
Your music is mostly chill out with an element of electronic music and with some Chinese folk, and as I understand with elements of Polish as well. What is your main message? How would you describe your music?
I was thinking most of the time I try to create the kind of holographic experience for people who is listening or who come to our concerts, because it's not just about the lyric or just about the melody, it's more about the atmosphere, the whole atmosphere in the music.
Mm-hmm. And what is the atmosphere in your music? What is your main message?
I think some of them are very abstract, so I would rather describe it more into the shape, the color, and this tiny abstract movement there. But some of the songs, they have much more detail and realistic topics, so it will make the atmosphere a little different. So people can understand your lyrics more, then it will make the different atmosphere in the live performance.
We don't have like a master plan. That this year we have this theme and we have to create 10 songs with this theme. It's more like there is a moment and of inspiration, and let's do music, let's do that song. Yes, and then Cinka is, closing everything and she's creating. And then we are trying to combine like different styles. We try to play it and just see what is the outcome.
And Cinka, what is your inspiration? It means that, do you have any problems or anything that haunts your soul, which you wanted to put to the music?
I don't have any problem about inspiration. Actually, I remember our friends once asked me, my friends are not musicians, so they're just very curious. They say, what if you don't have inspiration, but you want to create something, what will you do? I said, actually, I don't have that problem. I have always too many inspiration about different thoughts, about different things. So some of them are very personal feeling of some specific event happening in my life, or some is just a little tiny detail. Let's say in this morning we're driving and something is passing by and I think, oh, that's my inspiration. I'm going to write a song about it. So it's about everything.
And when it comes to putting together Polish and Chinese culture, is there anything which you write about this? Like, I don't know, do you miss your home, for example? Do you miss your Chengdu?
I think most of the time I'm fine here. I will miss my local food very much if I'm ill. Because, the tongue and your taste will always be very honest if you are weak and ill. But if I'm healthy and in good shape, I say I'm very fine here.
I see. That's good to hear as well. What instruments you work with usually?
Well, we work with electronic music mostly, so we use some software and some synthesizers that are inside and funny sound effects. But we also use some acoustic instruments. It depends on the occasion. So Lucia usually she uses her voice all the time, which is great, and some keyboards. That's her things. And I try to play bass, usually bass guitar, and I play acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and some synthesizers with usually bass is concerned.
But I've heard and I've learned that you played cello at the very beginning of your music career. Did you give up cello completely just for bass?
Well, actually, it's a long story, but my mother, she's a musician, so it was like natural way. So, little Peter, you need to go to music school. That was the idea. And then I also, like Cinka, I want to play piano because we have piano in home. So I like to just, press the keys, and it was funny sound. But they said I have to play cello. So, they choose it. So I was not really, I think, very happy about it. So then, many years later, I finally choose my instrument, which is bass guitar. It was kind of recently, because after cello, I played classical guitar in high school. And it was funny, but it was always like I'm playing somebody's music from 19th century, 18th century. But now really I learned how to improvise, how to have really creative fun with instruments. So I really appreciate it.
And do you both think that the music in education, even at the very beginning of life, connect with children, even if they won't become professional musicians later, is important.
I think so, because now even I'm 30-ish now, I still can remember when I was a toddler and what I've heard from my mama's tape and the radio, what music I heard there.
Actually, the music is a language, which we know that. So you should start to learn all these phrases and even complicated structures of music when you are very little. It's a language, so our brain, when we are that small, works very efficient. So totally agree. We should start with music as soon as we can. Well, I also work in foundation, and we have actually concerts for toddlers. It's called Smykofonia, and we see it. So you know, the emotions, everything is abstract. So kids also can have these emotions in them.
I think it's also great to say that music is a language worth to learn and worth to teach your children. Thank you for watching Poland Daily Culture.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we are discussing the events of World War II and the consequences for the Polish nation. We are in the Ochota district of Warsaw, right in front of the monument dedicated to the soldiers who held up the Germans for 19 days on September 1939. The historian Dr. Krzysztof Jabłonka will guide us through this turbulent time in Polish history. During the earlier episodes, we've been talking extensively about the Second World War, and we are coming to approaching the end of it. And I was wondering, during 1945, when Soviet took control of Poland, how did that happen?
Początkowo po przejściu frontu sowieckiego wydawało się.
Initially, after the arrival of the Soviet front, life seemed to return to normal, that there would be a continuation of the Second Polish Republic, its principles, especially legal and moral ones, that the Polish Church, which suffered extremely during World War II, will revive. Almost a quarter of the priests were murdered. Finally, it also seemed that the universities would resume their work, and so these appearances were preserved, formulating a government of national unity, where the function of only the deputy prime minister was foreseen for the Polish prime minister of Poland in exile, Stanisław Mikołajczyk, and people were promoted, who were in the opposition before the war, then as partners of the so-called Workers' and Peasants' Alliance. From then on, the Polish Workers' Party and the Peasant Party were to restore people's rule, which was the power of every citizen. But it turned out that the power was exercised only by the special forces. These were the Security Office and the Soviet occupation forces of the NKVD.
Czyli Urząd Bezpieczeństwa, zwany UB, oraz sowieckie siły okupacyjne, NKWD. Przeprowadzono niezwykle bestialską łapankę.
An extremely bestial roundup was carried out in Augustów, and about 600 people were transported in an unknown direction. They have not been found to this day. Finally, mass transport of both former Home Army soldiers and ordinary citizens, but suspected of sympathy for pre-war Poland East, to the German camps, along with Germany, began. Finally, in 1946, a preliminary referendum was held in which two questions could be seen in the so-called stupid questions, to which every Pole would answer affirmatively. Like, do you want the lands conquered by Germany to join Poland? Somebody would have to be anti-Polish to answer no. Only Germany did not want to. And are you for the nationalization of industry and land?
Przemysłu i ziemi. No, o ziemi akurat nie mówiono, bo chłopi posiadali przecież prywatną własność.
The land was not very relevant because the peasants had private properties and, of course, Poles also agreed. However, the third question was tricky and reversed. It was not affirmative, only negative. Are you for the abolition of the Senate? The Senate was the second chamber of parliament. This question would establish who was for People's Poland and therefore for the abolition and who was against. The slogan was 3 times yes. The perfect package answer would be yes, yes, and again yes. The Poles behaved wisely. 2/3 answered no to the first question. Then the referendum was rigged. This forgery was followed by another in 1947, when the elections for the Polish parliament were falsified. All votes were granted to a democratic bloc, which was actually a totalitarian bloc. Meanwhile, the Polish People's Party, which was a separate party, got over 75% of the votes, and these results were simply exchanged. These 75% were attributed to the parties that received only 25, and the 25 were attributed to the Polish People's Party, who actually were meant to win the election.
Przypisano PSL-owi, który te wybory wygrał. Skąd my wiemy, że wygrał?
How do we know that they actually won? One of the polling stations revealed the authentic results that accurately spoke of such proportions. Ultimately, the communist-dominated parliament adopted the Stalinist constitution, which established a perpetual alliance with the Soviet Union. Personal comments concerning the text of the proposal for this constitution were made by Joseph Stalin, hence it was called the Stalinist Constitution of 1952. It introduced the system and the name of the Polish People's Republic. In Poland, this name was not used, because it was neither Poland nor a republic, nor was it for the people. It was simply the Soviet
Ani
Republic.
Rzeczpospolita, ani na pewno ludowa. Była to po prostu Republika Sowiecka.
I would imagine the Soviet occupation would not run without resistance, and I was wondering how the Poles went about resisting the control of the Soviet Union.
Z chwilą, gdy Polacy zaczęli sobie uświadamiać, że ponownie znaleźli się w niewoli,
As soon as the Poles began to realize that they were again captive, and often as terrible as German captivity, resistance began to take place on 3 levels. The first level was the transition back to the underground Polish guerrilla, which established numerous resistance centers, eventually accumulated in the so-called Freedom and Independence Association, in short, WIN. The stupidity of Polish special services can also be measured by the fact that all wine sellers were arrested, thinking that having the word wine on their sign is conducive to conspiracy, as it was so similar to the WIN. Of course, there were also national armed forces in the underground, which by nature were anti-Soviet, as well as numerous Poles who returned from the West. The second level was cultural resistance. The Sovietization of Poland was not allowed or stopped. May 3rd was celebrated, not the 1st, for which, for example, Krakow was brutally dispersed and many people arrested. May 3rd, 1946 was the date of the first manifestation of the open struggle against communism after World War II. Finally, the third, probably the most effective, although the most dramatic resistance, was carried out by Polish families. At home, it was explained who murdered the officers in Katyń. There it was explained who Stalin was, that he was the murderer of humanity and an uncompromising enemy. Finally, Polish youth was taught how to be a patriot. Let me remind you that we are dealing with another Polish anti-communist uprising. The next one, following the Warsaw Uprising, which lasted until 1949, when the last units disintegrated and the so-called Fourth Command of the Freedom and Independence Association ceased their operations. It wasn't until October 23rd, 1963, that the last cursed soldier, at the time cursed by communism, Józef Franczak, nicknamed Lalka, died, betrayed by one of his relatives. The resistance that extinguished in 1963 was seized by the Catholic part of society, the majority of society, by organizing under the aegis of the Church in 1966 a powerful celebration of the millennium of the baptism of Poland, which the communists tried to oppose the millennium of the Polish state, which was nonsense because the Polish state existed 500 years earlier and was baptized, not just established. Canvas of these celebrations, letters of Polish bishops were sent to German bishops, which clearly stated, "We forgive you, the German people, your terrible sins of war, but we also ask for forgiveness in the name of the Poles who have sinned against you," to which the Polish Bolsheviks responded with terrible repression, screaming that they do not forgive, and eventually lost this fight. The Poles reconciled with Germany.
Wrzaskiem, że nie przebaczają i ostatecznie przegrali tę walkę. Polacy z Niemcami się pojednali.
As we have seen today, the Second World War had devastating consequences for Poland. Despite the country's best effort to fend off the German aggressors, Poland was occupied first by the Germans and then the Soviet Union until 1989. That's it for today. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.
Hello and welcome. It's time for another series of episodes in Poland Daily Travel. What's better to do on a bright, sunny summer's day than light out for the country? And that's just what we did. There are so many interesting and cool places near Warsaw to go and see. That makes a day trip full of adventure and surprises. We went west, first to Ożarów Mazowiecki, then cross-country. Nearby Sochaczew was the scene of the Battle of Bzura River in September 1939. The last Polish cavalry charge defeated German infantry. There's a museum and the ruins of the castle of the Dukes of Mazovia. Another cross-country jaunt and we come to Brochów on the Bzura River. There's a beautiful church with the design of a castle. Chopin's parents married here at the turn of the 19th century. So it's westward ho from Warsaw for Poland Daily Travel. Stay with us and sit back and enjoy the ride. Poland Daily Travel, your favorite travel programming about Poland.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. And as promised, we are in the beautiful village of Brochów. Yes, yes. And behind me is an old dvor, which belonged to the people running this village back once upon a time. At any rate, we are here about 10 kilometers from Żelazowa Wola, the place where Chopin grew up. And this direction, behind the camera, it's about, I would say, 4 or 5 kilometers into the center of the darkest part of the Campinos forest, the western part. And this is a busy area. There's a guy going by with his tractor because that's the way things go around here. That's right, we're out in the countryside and these guys have to tend to their crops. It's harvest time coming up. And it's time to stack the hay at any rate, don't you think?
I do think.
Do you have any hay to stack?
I do not, alas, I don't.
No?
No, no.
You wish you did. Why are you up there and I'm down here?
That's the way it is in show business.
What are you talking about? You can't. You're not allowed to be. You have to crouch down.
No, I can't.
I can't stand on my tiptoes.
The cameras have been set up. We can't do that. It would sabotage the program.
Have you been talking to the cameramen behind my back?
Operators, yes.
Yeah. Well, I seem to remember that I promised you something, didn't I?
You did. We're going to see a very interesting and exciting church.
Oh, well, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, why don't you just turn around and look right there?
And there it is. Remarkable.
A fortified church.
Fantastic.
The only kind of its kind in Poland, about 500 years old, at least. We're going to go and have a look at the church now in beautiful Brochów.
Let's go.
I always like to say, let's go.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, you have to go.
So
and it's two of us, so we say, let us go, right?
Let us go.
Yeah. I like being up tall again.
Yeah,
you see? I feel much better now.
You do?
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, I never have really looked up to you, Nicholas.
No, you haven't.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Poland Daily. That's welcome from me, Will, and from Nick, no relation, Richardson, whom I call, as you well know, Cousin Nicky. We're here in the beautiful, in front of the beautiful church here in Brochów, which is famous. Brochów is famous for at least two things. It's still a small village after having been established about 1,000 years ago as a settlement. It is still a small village, but this particular spot is known for two things. One, the church behind us, which is framed nicely, I hope, for you, which is where Chopin's parents were, in fact, married. Because you knew that, because we said this before. And also contains his birth certificate, or baptism certificate, right? And unfortunately, we can't go in. The church is locked and nobody's answering the bell. We'll try again, but we haven't had any luck so far. So we're just going to tell you that that is there. There's also a plaque, if not a monument, on the side of the church to this successful cavalry charge and battle, and the Battle of the Bezora River.
Bezora River, yes.
Right.
So I thought it was a trick question.
It wasn't a trick. No, the Bezora River. The Battle of the Bezora River from the 14th to 19th, 5-day battle in September of
1944.
39.
You see?
September 1939.
Right, yeah.
This was not the uprising.
No, of course.
But there were a lot of uprising activities around.
Yeah, well, of course, just the Campinos Forest, which is over there, of course, was
it's just here. Yeah.
An area used during the Warsaw Uprising for training, because you could be sort of hide there and train away from the Germans.
Yeah, parts of it are virtually impenetrable and impossible. It would take, 20, 30,000 soldiers just to try and comb that forest, and it would keep them busy for a year. So that wasn't going to happen.
No, it wasn't.
But what we can say is that if we go in here, we can see this plaque, and we can walk about and show the courtyard. Because what's interesting as well about this church, as we know, is that it went through several incarnations, the first being a wooden building and then a modified wooden building from about 1,000 years ago or 900 years ago. And for the next 300 years, it was updated as a wooden building. And then they got a little Renaissance influence and changed in about 550 years ago.
Yeah.
And became
this marvelous brick structure which we see behind us.
And if you notice, it doesn't really, it looks like a church, but it looks like a church with the aspects of a castle. Notice the fortified wall.
Yep.
With the what are those holes called?
Oh, the slits for
the slits for firing arrows or whatever.
They would be arrows originally.
Yeah, be arrows, and the towers, the high towers, one on. Actually, I'm going to turn around and just show one on either side. These high towers, which would have been for lookouts, and also would have given you a strategic advantage if somebody was attacking. So this must have been considered a very strategic point. Even though it was a village that long ago, it must have been a significant point, along with perhaps some settlements along the area of Warsaw, and of course the church in Płock, which was very old at that time, further up on the Wisła, Torun, some of that, which was the beginnings of Torun, and also the church just across the river over here, which I've forgotten the name of now. Which is also one of the oldest churches, about 15, 20 kilometers away. So it's an unusual building, isn't it?
Very unusual. I've not seen one like this in Poland.
I haven't either. Have you seen one in England similar to this?
No,
a church?
Not quite like
not
this.
Really,
No,
not quite like this. So it's a very unique piece of architectural history here in Brochów. Have you ever been here?
This
as long as you've lived in Warsaw.
This is my first visit to this little village.
Yeah, and you've as you've said before, you cycle a lot and you get around.
And then it's an important point to make. It is actually within, for those people who are keen on cycling, this is a relatively doable cycle journey from Warsaw.
Well, if you're keen, it's about 50 kilometers, or so from Warsaw. So you got to be pretty keen to go here and back. Of course, you can always go to the station in Sohachev, take the train back.
But you could do that.
So you don't have to do the
That's
round
kind
trip.
of cheating, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you only want to do
Half
part
the
of it
j-
and still
yes.
get out in the countryside, we don't want to, you know, we want people to have fun as well.
Well, we also yes. Fun.
They're not. What am I talking about? They don't all have to be in the Tour de Pologne.
Tour de Bologna, no.
No.
They don't
You can
have
just
to.
have fun.
Yeah.
Right. Just get out and laze
So,
along
yeah.
and come see
But
things.
it's still a
Or
nice-
take the train out and go back this
Yeah.
way. Maybe even more fun. Yeah. Because as you're, it's always there's some nice psychological factor involved here when you're going towards your objective and eating the kilometers meter by meter. As opposed to leaving your objective when you
Yeah,
know
which
you've
me.
got to return.
Which is a little
It
less
is for me.
exciting,
Do you
yeah.
find that?
I do find that actually,
Yeah,
yes.
So I get spurred on when I know I'm getting closer to home. Like a horse going to the stable. But you knew that already.
I did know that, yes.
More from Poland Daily here in Brohov. We'll be back. We're going to go walk around in the grounds of this church, castle. Call it what you will. Interesting building anyway. We'll be right back.